Hi everyone, it's week 4 of Know Your Audience, and I'm back with a bonus video to dig a little bit deeper into analysis. This week we've been talking about methods for measuring your success, and I wanted to get into some basic analysis tips that will help you um, work with your audience data. We have more audience data than ever, but it can often be either relying on dashboards that don't always have the data points and the answers to the questions that we have, or working with raw data. There's so much data, it's overwhelming. So I wanted to just work through some basic tips for data analysis in Google Sheets. You could do similar work in Excel for working with bigger data sets. And the goal for today is going to be to work with the data hands-on to figure out how to find answers to basic questions that we have, to figure out how to start working up trend lines that will help us set goals, and to figure out how to identify things that we'd like to test in our programming or our audience strategy that we can analyze and understand, so that as we go into an experiment, we can keep our eye on those changes and figure out if what we're doing is helping to move the needle or not. So let's start with the data. I have downloaded 3 data sets, 2 from Facebook and 1 from Sprout Social, which is what we use to do our social programming across Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. The great thing about Sprout is that it also compiles all of the insights from those different platforms into one place. So let's start actually with Facebook. I have a basic question that I would like to answer, which is, how am I growing my Facebook audience over time? Okay, so what I did to get an answer to that question is I went into Facebook and I went into Facebook Insights and I went to download my insights for my Facebook page. And what I got, and I've labeled it here in this document, Facebook Raw page, I got a ton of data back. As you can see, Facebook will overwhelm you with data, much of which you may not need, but some of which will be helpful. And usually the first thing that I do when I download a data set like this is I highlight, here I've done it in yellow, the data points or the columns that are most interesting to me or that I'm going to use in my analysis. And what I'm interested in here is the number of net daily likes. And this is actually a calculated field. What Facebook gives you out of the box is total new likes and total unlikes and total lifetime likes, which is the max number of fans that you have on any given day. And so all I did to get the net number of change in fans for the page is, I'll just replicate this for you. I did a very simple formula to subtract the total lifetime likes from one day, from the previous day from today. And I just carry that formula all the way down. And now you can see I have the total net daily likes, or the change in likes, for my Facebook page. So now what I'm going to do to try to figure out what this amounts to, not in such a granular measure of time, which is by day, but let's say I want to just see it by month. I'm going to grab this table. I'm not going to grab the whole thing. Let's say I'm going to grab from column A through column N, and I'm going to highlight everything that I pulled from Facebook. I believe I pulled it for the first 6 months. And I'm going to come in here to data. I'm going to select pivot table, and I've already created some placeholder tables, some tabs for these pivot tables. So I'm going to say existing sheet, and this is where it will let you tell it where you'd like to place this pivot table. I'm going to select the range, and I'm going to come over here to Facebook growth, and I'm going to drop my cursor in the first cell, and I'm going to say that's the destination and create. All right, and so the thing that I want to pivot by here is time. If you want to think of a pivot table, it is basically a way to anchor the different data points that you want to measure against one single piece of data. So in this case, the thing I want to pivot by or anchor in my data analysis is the date. So that's what's going to go in my row. And I'm going to come in here to rows. Oh, you know what? I didn't tell it that it had let's see, I forgot to tell it that I don't want this row A because those are the definitions. What I really want is to start with row 2. So that's my mistake. So I'm going to come back in here and I'll show you why that matters. I'm going to set this to A2 instead. Oh. Actually, let me just re-grab this. So I'm going to start with row 2 and now I have those column headers. Facebook will give you 2 rows of headers, basically, one which is the actual data label and the other which is the definition. So what I usually do is I pull the definition and put it at the very top so that I can ignore it. I forgot that step when I was setting the selection area for my pivot table. So now what I want to do is grab the date because that's what I'm going to pivot by. And then in terms of values, what I really want to see is the growth in likes. So what I'm going to do is come over here and grab that net daily likes field that I created, that calculated formula that I used. And the reason that I'm grabbing that instead of, and I'm going to select sum because I want the total. I don't want to grab the net or the total lifetime likes because that's probably just going to be one steady slope up. That's not going to really tell me if there are any interesting spikes, peaks, or valleys in terms of my overall Facebook fan growth. So when I boil this down to net daily likes, I can actually see if there is a particular spike in the number of people who liked my page on a given day or a given month. All right, so now this is a little bit better. I can see starting going back in January that the number of likes has kind of gone up and down. But this is still really granular. It's not as helpful if I'm trying to kind of get a sense of my growth over time in a more holistic way. So if I want to bucketize that pivot data point in a little bit different way, I can come in here and right click in any of those cells in the pivot column and create pivot date group. And then what I'm going to do is select basically a measure of time to regroup all of this information by. So I'm going to select year and month. And now, as you can see, it has retabulated those results to roll up all of those day-by-day net like totals into one total sum for the month. So then you can start to see, all right, if I highlight all of these, my average, here's my little shortcut, my average number of likes per month is about a little less than 700. It seems that, and if I come in here and I do format, one of the ways that I like to quickly see any trends visually, I'll come into conditional formatting on a range of metrics and I'll click color scale and I'll do sort of an inverse green, and that will help me see, wow, there was a really big spike here in June. So this helps with a couple of questions. It helps understand how fast are my, is my Facebook page growing? Is there anything unusual about that trend that might be worth investigating? I think the answer here is yes. There was some really big news event in June. For us, it's our immigration coverage. And it'll also help me understand what a realistic goal might be if I'm making some change to my Facebook strategy and I want to improve upon what has been typical for my Facebook page growth. I can come in here and see that, the average growth month over month, that my average number of fans is close to 700 at 689. And if I wanted to say, what is the growth month over month, I could come in here and do a percent change formula and also start to sort of see that trended. This is honestly not enough data to be able to kind of come up with a good trend benchmark. I would want to go back and grab more than just 6 months worth of data. The one thing to note about Facebook and a lot of the other social platforms with their exports, they limit the amount of data that you can export in any single session. So I pulled this really quickly for the purposes of demonstrating, basic analysis and pivot tables. But if I were you and I were really focusing on Facebook, for instance, I would go back in and gather as much time as you can. I would say at least maybe through the full 2018 and then the first 6 months, and that'll give you more of a sense of, right, what are the seasons of your news cycle. It'll help you put the peaks and valleys into context and understand what's typical, and hopefully help you pick a goal for improving over your typical performance. So let's practice with one more piece of data or one more data set to figure out, what our social audience in this case is looking like and ways that we might be able to improve. So the next question that I have that we might be able to answer with our audience data, in this case I have a little tab here called average Twitter reach. I want to know what the typical performance of our tweets are. So what I did was download a lot of our raw social post performance from Sprout. As you can see here, it has the date, it has the message type, which is where I published that, or in this case, Bobby Blanchard typically publishes a lot of our social content. It says who sent it, so if you have a team of people using your account to send things, and a host of other data. So what I'm going to do to get started to figure out, what our typical performance for tweets are, I'm going to grab this table the same way that I did the last one. I'm going to come in here to data, pivot table, existing sheet, right? Because I put together a placeholder tab. It's called average Twitter reach. I'm going to grab the first cell and click OK and create. And it's building. Okay. So what do I want to pivot by? I think I'm going to go with time again, just for the purposes of this demo. And I'm going to come in here to rows. I'm going to do date and values. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say I'd like to figure out what my overall reach was. What my engagement was. So let's say, for the most part, let's say retweets and replies. Okay. So the first thing that you notice when I pull these data points into the pivot table as it starts to compile here is I'm getting a lot of zeros, right? So the reason I'm getting a lot of zeros is because there was a lot of other information besides just Twitter in that raw table. So what I need to do is to come in here and filter out anything except for Twitter content. So I'm going to come in here to filters and add message type, because that's where I noted which social platform the content was published to. I'm going to deselect most everything. And I'm going to come back here and only select, tweets. Okay. So now you should see those zeros disappear. Wait a minute. Great. So I'm going to do the same thing. This table is getting a lot cleaner, but it's also still pretty overwhelming. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to right click on my pivot column, and I'm going to organize, I'm going to bundle these by year and month. Great. So then the last thing really that I'm going to do, and let's just wrap the text here so we can be reminded of what's in these columns. This is my total potential reach. This is the total number of retweets and the number of replies. So this is the sum. Let's say I wanted to see not just the total sum, but maybe what the average performance was. I'm going to copy this pivot table and I'm going to change the sum command to be average. And let's see if that's consistent. So I'm changing replies to average. Great. So then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do that trick again with conditional formatting, just to see color scale. I'm going to pick the inverse of that to see what stands out. Color scale, I'm going to do the inverse. Great. Great. Let's get my decimal points under control over here. Great. Image done. Great. Last one. So basically what we're seeing is pretty much what I saw, let's see, in my Facebook table actually, which was like, June was a really big month for us. Same. Let's say I want to also see what my productivity was. Like, is this 562,000 average because, well, maybe did I double the number of tweets I sent out, or was it really the news story? Like, what's the deal? I'm going to come in here to the pivot table. Whoop. And I'm also going to add a value here for the date. You could also pick, well, let's say message, because that represents the actual number of messages sent. And you're going to leave it at count. And you can see, actually, it's not that I produced more tweets. It's not about the volume. It's that there was much more interest in the tweets that I posted. So because I actually posted, fewer than I had in the first months of the year, and I got much higher reach and engagement for those tweets. So that answers that question. I wanted to know, what my typical, Twitter reach was, and what we're seeing here is that, my average Twitter reach was way up in June. Even though I produced fewer tweets. So my last question is, maybe I'm thinking about making some change in my programming strategy for social media, and I want to know, let's say, how does the length of my post on Facebook impact the reach and engagement of those posts? Maybe that's a question that you have had before. I'm going to come back in to my Facebook data to figure out if there's a way that I can run some analysis to help me understand how post length might impact my reach and engagement.